Police have no records of this town's existence. A family's discovery of perfectly preserved homes with meals still on tables. The woman in the window who shouldn't be there. And the government's suspicious demolition. The full investigation will leave you questioning reality. In the low breath of the morning fog, two silhouettes drifted into the tree line of the South Carolina backcountry, silent and deliberate, like figures in a dream where no birds ever sing. Nathaniel Cross and his teenage son, Malcolm, had waited years for access to this tract of forest. A property cordoned off from the world by a rusted iron gate and a lock code passed down like a relic from a secret society. The land was owned by an old army friend of Nathaniel's who swore it was untouched, unspoiled, and uninhabited. It was the promise of a hunter's paradise. Yet what awaited them in that bleak and airless thicket was not prey, but something that stalks silence. The moment they stepped beyond the dirt road and into the forest's belly, the absence of life became unbearable. No chirps, no rustle of leaves. Even the wind seemed to bow out in deference to the dread soaked into the soil. It was a silence so vast it hurt the ears, and both father and son said nothing, but each knew something was off. The deeper they walked, the more the forest felt like a painting rather than a place. A setting frozen in fear. They reached the clearing where the old hunting stand rose like a crooked crucifix among the trees. They set up, expecting at any moment to see movement in the underbrush. But the hours passed with not even a squirrel stirring in the brush. Nathaniel checked his fire weapon scope. Malcolm scanned the horizon. Stillness, not a whisper of wildlife. As dusk fell like a slow breath exhaled from the forest, Nathaniel suggested they push deeper, set camp somewhere more alive. They packed up and descended into a gloom that thickened with every step. An hour into their hike, they found a new clearing, a glade choked in mist and framed by gnarled oaks. They set their tent with expert hands and lit a modest fire, but the silence gnawed at them. Not even the crackle of the flames could push back the feeling that they were being watched. As darkness enveloped the clearing, they ventured a short hunt nearby. Still no animals, still no sound, just the feeling that the forest was holding its breath. When they returned, their tent was collapsed like a corpse folded in on itself. Malcolm said it couldn't be wind. There hadn't been a whisper of breeze all day, and the rods had been removed, not broken, not snapped, just removed deliberately, as if someone or something had undone their shelter with fingers that knew how. They rebuilt the tent under a canopy of dread and barely whispered a word over the fire. They didn't know how to explain it, so they didn't. Later that night, in the black hour before dawn, Malcolm awoke to laughter. Faint, distant, unnerving. It slithered through the trees like a sound not meant for human ears. He turned and saw his father still asleep. He froze, listening. Nothing, not even the echo of that terrible laugh. Just the silence pressing in again. Hours later, he awoke to find his father staring into the dark with terror painted on his face. The laugh had returned, closer this time, and they both heard it. It wasn't joy or amusement. It was deliberate, drawn out, and human-like, but twisted. It circled them, sometimes in front, sometimes behind. And then came the running, heavy, pounding, fast. A charge through the forest like a predator rushing prey. Then silence. Then the laugh again, now right outside the thin membrane of nylon that shielded them. Nathaniel gripped his fire weapon. Malcolm gripped his father's arm. And just as the zipper moved, just a fraction, the laughter stopped. No footsteps, no voices, just the realization that whatever was outside knew they were inside. It had been listening, and then it was gone. The next morning, they didn't break camp. They ran. With fire weapon clutched and sanity unraveling. They tore through the brush, eyes wild, breath ragged, not daring to look back. When they reached the truck, they didn't speak. They just drove until pavement replaced gravel and the forest disappeared in the rearview. And when they told the landowner, he simply said it couldn't have happened. No one else had access. But Nathaniel and Malcolm knew. Something was out there, and it didn't want them to leave. Several hundred miles west, in the summer heat of Yosemite's wilderness, a girl named Ivy set up camp with her father. The Sierra Nevada range towered around them, but their little tent site was tucked far from the usual clusters of tourists. They were given the last available spot, the one people avoided. It was distant from the bathhouses, far from the swimming hole, and separated from the rest of civilization by dense woods and worn trails. Her father, a seasoned hiker with old soul instincts, didn't protest. Ivy had no idea that distance would soon become terror. They hiked all day. When they returned, they each retired to their individual tents, small, minimalist cocoons that could barely stretch a person's legs. The night was warm, so Ivy left her tent unzipped and her legs out, trusting in the forest's peace. Around 3 a.m., she awoke to footsteps, soft but deliberate, from the wrong direction, the side opposite the path to the bathhouse. She assumed it was her father until the steps paused just outside her tent, and something, leaned in close. She could hear the breathing, slow, intent, watching, took everything she had not to scream. Then the footsteps resumed, slow, circling, pausing again, this time at her feet. She remembered then that her legs were still exposed. As she trembled in silence, something pinched her foot. Not a twig, not an insect, a hand, cold, curious. She yanked her legs back inside without a sound, paralyzed by the knowledge that she had just been touched by a stranger in the middle of nowhere. The figure lingered beside her, breathing heavy over the tent, until finally it drifted toward the cooler. Ivy heard objects being shifted, then nothing. No footsteps receding, just silence again. Hours later, when the sun broke the sky, she burst out and ran to her father's tent. He was already up, white as ash. He had heard it all too. The rummaging, the steps. He hadn't dared move. But what chilled them both to the bone wasn't the story they told each other. It was what they saw on the picnic table. Their belongings had been stacked into a pyramid, each item arranged with unnatural precision. Food, cutlery, shoes, water bottles, a silent monument to madness. And there were footprints, circles of them, around Ivy's tent, as if the intruder had performed a ritual around her while she slept. They fled the campsite and never returned. Ivy never left a tent unzipped again. In the secluded wilds of Ontario, just past the borders of mapped comfort, an old cabin lay at the edge of a forgotten lake. Owned by the Callister family since the 1950s, it was a retreat meant for isolation and clarity. But one summer, the Callister children wandered too far into the reserve across the road and stumbled upon a ghost town hidden in the green. Not a dilapidated ruin, but a hamlet frozen in time. Houses with dishes still on tables, beds still made, cars rusted where they were last parked. It was a world interrupted, not abandoned, paused. The kids returned with their father, eager to show him the mystery. Together they explored, marveling at the eerie preservation. Inside one home, a pristine bedroom bore a fur coat at the foot of the bed, perfectly preserved. Their father held it up. Real fur, expensive. He hesitated but eventually took it, convinced no one lived here anymore. But as they left, one of the children looked back and saw her, a woman in the window. Gray hair, pale skin, blue shawl. Watching, they froze, guilt washing over them like a wave. They hurried back to return the coat. As they approached, the woman vanished into the house. The father stepped inside, apologizing, calling out. But no answer came. Then from across the street, in the most decrepit house of them all, a window slammed. And then, "Get out." The father exploded out of the house, urging his kids to run. Behind them, the buildings loomed like sentinels of something ancient. They didn't stop running until trees shielded their view. When they dared look back, they saw her again in the window, but she was no longer alone. A tall man stood behind her, his body bent awkwardly to fit into the frame, his face contorted in something between hatred and hunger. They never returned, and weeks later, the government bulldozed the entire settlement. No records, no explanations, just disappearance, like the place had never existed. In the still corners of the world where man forgets to look, there are places where time folds and reality bleeds. Forests that do not belong to the living, campgrounds visited by more than tourists, villages where the past never really left. And those who wander into such places may find that silence is not the absence of sound. It's the presence of something watching, something ancient, something that was there long before us and will be long after we're gone. Now ask yourself, have you ever walked into a forest and felt eyes you couldn't see? What would you have done if your tent zipper began to move, or your gear was stacked into a shrine of madness? Could it be that some parts of this world were never meant to be disturbed? We want your theories in the comments. And if you felt the chill of being watched, subscribe. Because next time, the silence might not let you leave.